like everyone else, I'm not quite sure really what Web 3.0 is. What I do think, though, is that it's different from 2.0. And I think that a lot of people are almost in that mindset now that 2.0 has happened, this is the future of the web, you know, this is the future of digital. There's a sort of sense that, well, yes, everything's going to be digital, so everything's going to be a bit normal again for a while. And what I actually do think is that the next couple of years, we're going to see more change than we have in the previous 5. And I think that the difference between, let's call it 3.0 and 2.0, is the fusion in of commerce into that socially connected web. And I think that that's going to be a huge challenge for everyone in digital marketing. It's going to be a huge challenge for brands and a huge challenge for agencies. One of the biggest things I think is different is that we're going to have a very different way of thinking about planning. What we're going to look at is that digitization of media, and no one can really predict how fast it'll happen. One of the big differences is it's going to be very, very measurable, and measurable on its outcome rather than output. And that's one of the, that's going to be a critical difference, because communication, advertising, you know, it's going to get much closer to how much does it actually drive business performance. And this is what I think is a really interesting area, because I would actually classify, funny enough, there's a sense that there's the business people in advertising, and there are the creative people in advertising. You know, and there's a sort of, historically we've been sort of mediary people in the middle. And somehow we need to bring, and I've actually always said this, the technology, the data, the media strategy and the creatives really together into the process in a way that there's mutual respect and a really different way of working, where there's an equality of thinking, so that real hard data about consumers, real focus on business performance, because every single budget going forward is going to get measured against that, but a real respect for genuine creativity, because that ultimately at the end is what reaches the consumer. That's what they make the decision about. That's going to become especially important as we actually move away from a campaign-based world into one of continuous marketing. Again, this is something that I think people are just beginning to get their head around. And it's actually really quite logical. If you think of the consumer as always on, and you think of the brand as on demand, you're actually moving into a world where it's not enough for brand communication to be when the brand wants to speak. We can see what is happening. We can understand what people like and what they don't like. We can understand what they're reacting to and what they're not. And we have to continuously adapt and react to that. Advertisers and brands are faced with obviously a number of challenges, which are going to become very exacerbated, especially in the West, over the next year, 18 months, as the economy really softens. For marketers, there's going to be a huge pressure on accountability. You know, the rise of procurement will not stop. You know, the rise of procurement will mean that in all areas of marketing services, you know, agencies are going to be under pressure, but so are marketers. So are brand marketers within companies are going to be shown, and they're going to be required to deliver a return on that investment. This is almost goes back to what I was saying at the start, which I think is incredibly exciting for marketing, is that marketers are actually going to have and begin to get tools to be able to say, yes, that did work and it did produce this. And the electronic nature of the industry actually means that, again, campaign planning and setting marketing budgets is going to become less and less the norm. It's more going to be about, here's our continuous set of activity and presence. Here are products, brands, ideas we want to promote. And it will be about promoting them, launching them. If they don't work, they're almost immediately curtailed. If they do work, they'll keep being supported and developed on an ongoing basis until they stop to work. And the great thing is we'll be able to see in real time whether they work, not whether they've driven up a bit of awareness, not whether they've driven up saliency, but whether they're actually having an impact on sales. So that becomes incredibly exciting for marketing, provided marketers get their head around it. And I think that's the biggest impact that digital will have, is it has to change the mindset. It has to change the mindset of clients, agencies, advertisers alike. And it's the one thing that will enable marketers and agencies to put procurement in its rightful place. And procurement does have procurement can have a very positive role, actually, funny enough, but not if it's determining strategy based upon driving a cost down, because advertising, branding, marketing is seen as a cost and not an investment. And that's the challenge for marketing, is that we have to get right back to the top table. We have to be seen as a driver of business, not a cost of doing business. We have to be seen as the discipline that actually takes the product or the service and actually links it inexorably to the consumer. So I think it's an exciting time for marketing. And what's clear is that there's a radically different visual style to what works in China to what works in Sweden, for instance. And I think there's an aesthetic that people have got to, especially on the digital side, have really got to understand and appreciate. A Chinese consumer, if they look at a lot of the activity that is considered to be beautiful and effective in Europe, they just think it's the most boring thing they've ever seen. All the way around the world, again, we have to really value the diversity and begin and really look at work and put it in its cultural context. Again, thinking about what is one of the big challenges for brands, and what I want to see come out here is that, again, brands obviously have got to think past being a product, past being a brand with emotional values. I think what's going to make a real difference is what utility do they offer consumers, what service do they offer consumers. Even if it's a product, service design, product utility, the overall utility that the brand delivers to the consumer is going to be a critical measure of success. And through digital media, so many of those things can be delivered to the consumer, and I want to see some of those. But I also want to see how is digital being used to really release the emotional values of the brand. I think that's very, very important. Again, too much that I've seen in communication is we'll use television to express the emotional benefits, and we use digital to drive accountability and return on investment. And actually, I think, again, if you talk about convergence, talk about blurring, those things coming together, that is a key challenge for our planners and a key challenge for digital people to really deliver the emotional values of the brand in a way that is also accountable.